Ladies and gentlemen, podcasting since 2005. You're listening to Gamertag Radio. With your hosts, podcaster Hall of Famer Danny Pena, the always opinionated Paris Lilly, and from outside of the norm, Peter Toledo. This is Gamertag Radio.
All right, welcome to Gamertag Radio episode 792. And yes, I'm live here in San Francisco. I'm here for an event, which I'm going to talk about it more next week. So yeah, I got together with Greg Miller, co-founder of Kinda Funny Games. Make sure to check out their official Twitch website, podcast, everything, man. Shout out to them. And actually, I went to their studio and recorded an interview with Greg. We talked about a lot of things, about his career, what he thinks about, the gaming industry, podcasting, and we talked about a lot of things. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy this interview. So make sure to check it out here in a couple minutes. But if you're listening to this, first time or not, head over to gamertagradio.com. You can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and other podcast directories. Also, if you want to support us, go to store.gamertagradio.com. You could buy fairy gear. We have t-shirts of Gamertag Radio, bunch of goodies, even posters, all that good stuff. Make sure to support us. Or if you want to also subscribe to our Twitch channel, go to twitch.tv/Gamertag Radio. All right. So we're going to play the interview here with Greg, and we'll be right back after this.
Send us your feedback or questions. Give us a call at 786-273-7GTR. Email us at fanmail@gamertagradio.com or leave a message on speakpipe.com/gamertagradio.
That's the best, man. Yeah. All right, so we have a special guest here at Gamertag Radio, Greg Miller, co-founder of Kinda Funny Games, right?
That's right, yeah. How are you?
Good, man, good. Here, checking out the studio. Like the setup, man.
Yeah, you didn't even get the tour. You came right in, you put it down, you're set to go. I love it.
Yeah, definitely, man. But you know what? A lot of people want to know more about you. Let's go before
way back.
We're going
way back.
Tell us a little about yourself, man, before doing the whole journalism stuff.
Oh my gosh! So you go back to the suburbs of Chicago, right?
Shit. Oh, you're
born and
Chicago.
raised. Oh yeah, out there
nice.
in DuPage County represent.
So you tried to apply gaming sites back in the days in Chicago?
Oh, I'm so old. I tried to apply gaming magazines. That was it.
Oh yeah.
You ever hear about these?
Yeah.
I was lucky enough that it's such a strange thing to think about, not anymore, I guess, but back then about how you get into this industry and what you would do, right? There were no panels, there were no PAXs to go talk to people and interface. Mm-hmm. For me, it was a huge eye-opening experience, once I discovered that this is what I wanted to do, that I could go and I could, look at EGM, and I eventually figured out, reverse engineer, that EGM was like the suburb next to me. They were over in Oak Brook, I believe, and I was over in Glen Ellen, same... I went to Oak Brook all the time because they had a Warner Brothers studio store. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was like so approachable that they were right there. And so like through the years being a huge EGM fan, and obviously everything else, and there's a tired old story of Game Pro being the magazine where I was like, this is what I could do with the rest of my life. Yeah. But I followed the dream because, okay, these guys could do it, I could do it. Mm-hmm. And the plan was always, in high school when I graduated, to go to Mizzou, get a degree in journalism, and then move back to the suburbs of Chicago and work at EGM. And my sophomore year at Mizzou, I opened up EGM, and there was the little letter from the editor from Dan Chu.
Oh,
and it was just
Dan.
Yeah. Oh God, I love Dan. Yeah. And it was, hey, EGM's moving to San Francisco because that's where the entire industry was. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna move to San Francisco one day. Turned the page and kept reading about video games. You know what I mean?
How long you been here now since you?
I will celebrate 12 years in San Francisco this May. Nice. No, March.
I was reading one of your tweets.
Sure.
And it was share your rejection.
Oh, sure.
And one of them was that you tried to apply IGN. I think it was like 13 times or something like that.
On my post college email, because it was I had a .edu account that I also applied all the time for with EGM, IGN, 1UP, everything. Mm-hmm. And then when I got that shut off, I started a Gmail, and so now that's all there for forever, right?
Yeah.
And so when I finally got the job at IGN, it was my 13th attempt on that post college email, which I had for a year and a half at that point. And what had happened is, I went to Mizzou, got the degree in journalism, thought that I'd be able to write my own ticket. I'd be able to leave with this degree in journalism, be able to write for any video game magazine I wanted. And I graduated, and nobody would touch me with a pole, man. Nobody would even return my emails. And so worked at a daily newspaper for a year and a half. A year in, convinced them to give me a video game column and a video game blog, and did that for 6 months. And after the 6 months, I applied at IGN, and it was the first time applying since they'd given me all that. And I would say, I applied, and then about a month later, IGN contacted me, interviewed me, and hired me in the course of about 22 hours.
Oh my God. You were super excited, right?
Dude,
Like,
overnight, all my dreams came true. You know what I mean? Literally the thing I had been trying to do my entire life, since 4th grade, right? I got overnight, like my world changed. And it was like, cool. I went from, holy shit, I remember the night before, getting the email from Jeremy Dunham popping of like, hey, do you want to talk about this tomorrow? And like, yeah, I do. To the next day, like, all right, in 2 weeks, I started IGN. And when I got to IGN finally, like at the end of the day, Chris Rober had walked me around and shown me everything. And at the end of the day, he's like, yeah, you got any, all right, so that's pretty much it. You got any questions for me? And I was like, yeah, why now? He's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I applied 13 times, and I went back and looked. Those first 12 times on this account, you didn't even give me a, hey, thanks for applying, but no. I never got an interview. I never got anything. But then
you just said no. You felt like, man,
shot it into a black hole, right? Yeah, like I shot it into a black hole. I'm like, what changed this last time? I've been ready to go for a year and a half. And he was like, you proved you could do it. Like, you were doing a weekly column and you were doing a daily blog. Like before I had been submitting in a blog post I did here on oneup.com or an article I did here for my college newspaper and then another article 6 months later. There wasn't any consistency to it. I wasn't showing that I had anything. And he's like, once you did the column and you did the blog, we saw that you had something to say every day. You could talk about a wide variety of things in gaming, and that you could also, a blog is very different than a column. Like you could write in many different ways. And so like that was the fact. You proved you could actually be here.
Yeah. I remember emailing IGN back in, I think it was like 01.
Yeah.
Because that's when I started experimenting with internet radio.
Sure.
56K days. So, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I sent them a couple emails like, hey, look, nobody's doing this. I would love to do this on IGN. Completely ignored.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, like you figure when I got to IGN, Damon had already been there for maybe coming up on a year, maybe a little bit more than a year. And, he was doing GameScoop, and it was like, I started being on GameScoop at like episode 22. You know what I mean? And it was that thing that a lot of people didn't get it. And even when Jeremy Dunham took over, it was like, all right, every IGN channel team, because that's how it used to be, needs a podcast of its own. So that's where Beyond came from, and Three Red Lights and all that jazz.
You came up with the idea with Beyond?
No, I was on the original Beyond cast, but no, I was such an underling. It was Jeremy Dunham was leading the PlayStation team, hired me. He got promoted to being like editorial manager, taking over the editorial, overseeing it. And that's when he was like, every team needs its own podcast. And they were like, we're going to do Podcast Beyond. He saw ahead of it in a way that I think a lot of people didn't. And when we started doing that, there was a lot of pushback because I got hired I was new blood. Damon and I were new blood, and we were coming in to take over for the guys that pretty much started the site. And so many of them were old and set in their ways of like, no, I write about games. I don't want to do podcasts. I don't want to, that's not what I want to do. Not everyone, but so many people were like, this is a waste of our time. Like we could be playing games. We could be writing more stuff. Why would we go do this? And there was a lot of conversations for a long time in the early days of this at IGN of like, maybe we just stopped doing podcasts. Like they weren't selling ads on them. They weren't doing any of this stuff. So it was that you were sending 4 or 5 people into a room, and IGN was always, in my day, I don't know what they are now. Back in these days, they were very big on man hours, right? So it's like, cool, we're losing, if 5 of you go in there, that's 5 man hours right there as you record the show, let alone Damon editing it for another hour. Like, well, what's the return on this? They couldn't see, of course, what a podcast does and what a podcast, the kind of audience and community that breeds and the loyalty and all that other stuff that comes through.
And the engagement too, right?
Sure, of course, yeah. But you figure like, this is such a different internet and IGN back then, where it was, remember, I'm so old that it was, I'd write a review, and then what I would have to go do is go post the link in, like I write a PSP review. I take the link of the review, go into the IGN boards, go into the PSP message board and post the thing there, because all we had was the IGN message boards. There was no comment system on the page. Like that was a huge deal when comments finally came to the pages of the articles. But you're talking about engagement, like you were finding a community that was incredibly dedicated because they had to go use the IGN message boards or stuff. There was no Twitter yet. Like people weren't using that. We didn't. You were communicating. There were so many hurdles to you talking to that community that I totally understand for IGN. And these are years and years and years ago bosses of IGN, how they couldn't see that there was this huge community behind it that cared.
And when do you think your career changed ever since you started podcasting back then? Was it an interview? Was it maybe a conversation or roundtable, something that got...
So what do you mean? You mean in terms of my perception of my career, or do you mean like a moment where I took off?
Yeah, when you took off, right? Since you started podcasting.
I mean, the moment my career changed was Up at Noon. You know what I mean? I had been doing Game Scoop and Podcast Beyond for years and years at that point. What Up at Noon we do the pilot in 2011, and you figure I started at IGN in 2007 and was pretty much immediately on podcasts. But it was this thing that I was on podcasts and they were popular and I was building this community. But again, that's a hard engagement to show. You know what I mean? People are sure in the comments or this, or I started going to PAXs, you know what I mean? Or other shows like that. And it was weird when people would start to recognize us, or we'd go, I mean, the old days, it was like, hey, Game Scoop, I'm coming to San Francisco this weekend. Do you guys want to hang out? And us being like, yeah, sure. And we'd go to the bar with you and just hang out with you and, shoot the shit and go to dinner. Because it was so rare that anybody wanted to connect that way. And so when you start going to PAXs and it started to be like, oh man, we're drawing a big crowd for these panels. Oh wow, we're getting a lot of emails. Oh wow, people want to work with us because we can do things. You understood there was a following behind it, but it still was so like smoke. How do you catch this? How do you quantify what's happening? And so it was cool, and IGN understood I was popular, but they were still very much pushing like on camera hosts and this, and then over the career starts to go. We started doing like PlayStation Conversation, and there's all these other Game Scoop TVs videos we're doing, where now you see comments. Now people are starting to attach like, oh, I've read this guy's reviews for a few years. Now I know what he looks like, and I actually think he's funny, and I'll watch these weird skits or weird videos he's doing, and maybe that'll actually bring you into the podcast or do something like that. But it was, when we were in the meeting, IGN was teaming up with YouTube to do this year-long stint called Start, to see what this is like. YouTube wanted to challenge the notion that YouTube was just cat videos. They wanted to actually invest with partners in long-form content shows, and IGN was the video game partner for that. And we went to one of the first kickoff meetings. I'll never forget it. We were sitting there, and I thought I was just in there because at the time I'm like ride or die IGN. I am like the test of IGN-ness. Everybody loves me at IGN because they understand I'm so IGN. And I had an audience, sure, but not like quantifiable and not in a way I thought about it. And we were sitting there talking about these show ideas, and Nick Scarpino was like, yeah, and this other one we want to do is a late night talk show, and I think Greg should host it. And I was like, what? And like, I didn't know, like now it sounds funny because Nick's a co-founder for Kind of Funny. I work with him every day. But at the time, like I was editorial, he was video, and we saw each other here or there, but it wasn't like a big deal. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so we started pitching the show Up at Noon, and we hired Mike Drucker eventually, and Brian was on it and all that stuff. And the show was called Up at Noon with Greg Miller, and I would hear a quote years later, I think, from I always screw it up, but I want to say it was Dennis Miller. It was definitely one of the hosts of Weekend Update on SNL. And when he got that job, someone on the SNL staff was like, "Man, everything's gonna change for you now." And he was like, "What do you mean? No, like I've been on skits before." And like, no, but now people know your name. And it was 100% true that sure you've read my reviews, but what do most people do when they read a review, right? Oh, IGN gave it a 9. IGN said it's bad. IGN
it was Greg Miller.
Exactly, right? And so a Beyond fan or something like that, a Game Scoop fan would know what I was thinking, but that was a very specific audience where suddenly, even if you never listened to Podcast Beyond, you never watched a PlayStation Conversation, you never wanted to click through to see what I thought of a review, suddenly my face was on the cover. Once a week, I was on the cover of IGN at least on Monday, usually talking about being in a video game or whatever the stuff. And so that was when it really turned a corner to being like, oh, we're off to the races in a completely different way, and people are seeing me a completely different way. And not only is the audience seeing me in a completely different way, our peers were seeing me in a different way, right? Like I'd go to preview events now or review events, and people I had been next to in the trenches for years and years and years who we never spoke to were suddenly coming over to me and be like, man, Up at Noon's really good, or oh my gosh, it's cool to see you doing this, or it was something different in the industry at the time that was like an interesting breakthrough, and it changed a lot.
So when you decided, all right, I think it's time for me to make my own thing, I want to Kind of Funny. So how that started?
That started. So you figure when we start up at noon, for all intents and purposes, I've been there 5 years, right? So like it really gets going in 2012. And what I found myself doing was, people tend in the old days at IGN when I was still there, they'd burn out, right? And it would be that not even that you burn out because you're sick of doing the job, you'd burn out because, well, where can I go from here? I'm on a team. My boss isn't leaving the team anytime soon. I lead a team. The heads of the company aren't leaving anytime soon. So people would do the same thing week in, week out, day in, day out. And eventually just be like, I got to move on. And that's why you see so many people move to PR, because you can't move up in the company, so you can't get a raise, so you can't take care of the ballooning costs of San Francisco and things like that, right? You want to start a family, you want to do this different stuff. You don't want to go to these crazy gaming events all the time.
Yeah.
I was always lucky enough at IGN that I was very vocal in my annual reviews or whatever about what my goals were and what I wanted to do with the company. And, all the time pretty much when I said I needed something, IGN was there to give it to me, right? And so like that's how I go from being hired as the PSP editor to running the PlayStation team to needing another outlet to wanting to do this video show to want, all these different crazy ideas that will come to be. And what had happened in 2012 was I got up at noon and it was great. But I had found myself still doing up at noon, but then also still reviewing games and still capturing my own screenshots and still getting my own video for video reviews and struggling with the idea when I came home that nothing was mine, and not in a bad way, but in the creative outlet way that I'd come home and play more games to make more content for IGN stuff. And that's what the job had always been. But it was the first time where I was like, I need something that's mine. I need something I can create and I can put out there, and it doesn't have to go through the filter of my editor or the video team for a pitch, or and not even. And none of this is bad, but like a joke I have, but then me and Mike and Brian and I want to twist it a bit. I want to just put something out there, and so I looked into writing a comic book. I looked into writing a children's book. I looked into all these different outlets of something I could have myself, and none of them were exactly what I wanted. I couldn't find what I wanted. And so Up at Noon's been going a few months now, and it's strictly a YouTube show, which was brand new for IGN. It wasn't going up on IGN. It was only on the YouTube channel Start. Mm-hmm. And so we came up on VidCon that summer, and VidCon is basically GDC for YouTubers. So you go there, you go to different panels led by other successful YouTube people. They tell you best strategies, best practices, what's worked for them, and it's this learning thing. Still kind of is like that, but it's way more about fans now. We started going when it was very much like, oh, you're a YouTuber and you want to make better YouTube videos or understand the system better. Here, come with us. Mm-hmm. So I remember them telling me, we want to send you to this VidCon. And I was like, what is VidCon? They're like, it's a YouTube convention where you learn to use YouTube. And I'm like, I have a show that goes live only on YouTube. I understand YouTube.
I don't need that.
I'm in the comments every time it posts. I totally get this. You're crazy. And they were like, at the very least, we want you to go so that you can meet other YouTubers and get them to come up on the show. Because the show was, if you're not familiar with Up at Noon originally, in my day and age, it was a monologue like Weekend Update. Then it was a real interview with a developer, a celebrity, a YouTuber, whatever you wanted it to be. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll go meet Phil DeFranco, iJustine, all these people and bring them up. Okay, fine. And, Colin, who's ex-roommate, co-founder of Kind of Funny, I remember him saying that when I was getting ready to go do this, I was like, ugh, God, I got to go do this thing. I'll see you later. And left the house. And then smash cut to me coming back on Sunday, coming in with just rambling about like, dude, this is what I've been looking for. And we can do whatever we want on YouTube. And it's going to be great. And he was like, like the apostles with the Holy Ghost above their head.
Ideas.
Right. Yeah.
So he was kind of inspired by
oh my God. I was blown away by that VidCon. I remember sitting in these panels and people talking, and they were saying so many things I didn't know I had been doing, where it was like, oh, well, people build these, because I'd always thought that like, I guess when I started the YouTube thing, I had thought that, man, I'm so far behind everybody, right? Like there is a Phil DeFranco and there is an iJustine and there is, Boogie, and there's all these other people who are successful and do this stuff. And I remember thinking like, I'm late to this. I don't have an audience like they do. I don't have and stuff. And in reality, when I was running through these VidCon things of like, well, these channels have catchphrases and they have this thing and they do. And I was like, oh, Beyond. Oh, and like, oh, they talk straight to their audience. That's what I do. And it was this like light bulb moment of like, I had been building this for IGN, or I had been building this through IGN. I'd been building a persona on my own with IGN, which was great. But suddenly it was like, man, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to make my own videos. I want to have my own YouTube channel. I want to create whatever content I want and put it out there for people to consume and connect with.
And and the thing too, you pay your dues, man. You were there, in IGN doing multiple stuff plus
Sure.
the videos and
Sure.
everything. And it's good to make that change. It's a risk. It's a risk.
yeah.
And I think in life you definitely need to take that risk.
And that was the thing of like, starting starting youtube.com/GameOverGreggy. It was like I had an idea and still do, I guess, for a wing show. That's what I wanted to do. I left that VidCon like, I want to make this chicken wing show. And but then there was the realization, like, and I'm talking at the airport with Nick Scarpino and Tim Geddes and Fran Mirabella about this YouTube channel I want to start. And Nick and Tim were like, all right, too. Nick's like, I'll help you film it. Tim's like, I'll help you show you how to make thumbnails. And they both were like, we'll teach you how to use Premiere and stuff. Cause I was just so hungry all of a sudden to do it. And so the idea was like, okay, cool. I want to make this wing show and put it on my channel. And then it was the thing, well, I don't know how to edit, and I don't know how to use a camera, and I don't know how to use lights and all this stuff. And it was just like, I don't know how to make thumbnails. I have no idea what it's like in the YouTube backend. And so I was like, you know what I'll do is I'll make other shows first, and then I'll use that experience when I'm ready to go make the wing show. And so, I made the show called The Conversation with Colin, where I just interviewed Colin. I made this show called Oreoration, where I just reviewed Oreos. And these were totally the goofball projects I thought were going to be the first at bats that I would just have a crash course on and then move on to my big ideas and stuff. But they escalated into something completely different, right? Because I started doing this and learning and then having conversations with IGN of like, well, I want to start a YouTube channel. And then I'm being like, well, cool. But like, you can't talk about video games. You can't talk about anything that would go on IGN, right? And I was like, oh, and there's that push and pull and all these different things. And
taking our viewers away.
exactly. No, and there was a lot of concern, right?
I mean, with business, like the business point of view, I can understand why.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can totally get it. I mean, because again, remember, like, this is still like, I'm on a big upswing at IGN right now, right? They've just taken a chance on me, giving me this talk show that I've been doing for maybe 6 months when this all starts happening. And like my name is on it and my Twitter numbers are growing and it's all this different stuff. And it was like that gets to be a complicated message for them. I get it. You want to be, if you're IGN, the only place to get Greg Miller video content because you were betting on Greg Miller video content. And so like there was a lot of conversations that they were super respectful about, and I like to think we came to a good understanding of like, cool, it'll be non-video game stuff and non-stuff that would normally go on IGN, right? And like that, turns into, we start wanting to film more Oreo shows, more of the Colin shows. And so it was like, us in the car after work driving, or on the weekend, Nick, Tim, and me and Colin going home and having these conversations, having so much fun. And then one day in the car being like, this conversation should be a podcast. What would that look like? That becomes the Game Over Greggy show, right? And this escalation of it all to the point that, I always, when I came to IGN, I was always like, this is my dream. And people were always like, well, you're a young kid. Like, what happens next? And it was always that, well, I don't ever plan on leaving IGN, but if I'm going to leave IGN, it'll be when this isn't my number one priority anymore. You know what I mean? Like when this isn't when I'm not having as much fun here as I am having fun somewhere else. And that was what I think we all struggled with, was that we started getting to that point and realizing it, like, we're having more fun making this podcast and fucking around with each other. And I'll never forget when I went and did the Gauntlet season 2, Tim came with me to Austin, and we were in the hotel room one night, and we had filmed a whole bunch of, I guess, either Game Over Greg show or the Conversation with Colin shows, and we were making thumbnails, him and him, maybe even Greg Ways. We were making thumbnails, him and me, and he was making thumbnails and I was making publish info. And he turned to me and he goes, "What do you think of this thumbnail?" And I looked at him like, "That's great." And he laughed, and I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Isn't this awesome? Like, that's it. We're done. That's a decision that's been made." Whereas not to offend IGN, but it would have been, well, what do you think? I think it's great. Great. What does the boss think? Oh, they want this change. Well, now that's pissed off this person. But like, how do you know what I mean? Like the little, tiddlywinks that happen when you have a lot of people working on projects. Whereas here it was like, we want to do this. We're going to do it. We stand by the decision. Okay, it's out.
Yeah. You know what I love about you guys, that you guys really engage with the community, like with your fans. And that's a thing that a lot of content creators, they just thinking about the numbers.
Sure.
Front page and like Twitch
yeah.
and so on. But they forget the community, the people that actually support. They're taking their time to watch you live or record it.
Oh, yeah.
Donations and all that stuff. So I like that you guys are really doing that big time. You know,
I mean, that's the whole point of it. You know what I mean? Like that, the old thing that I didn't realize I was doing back at IGN, but it was true, was, you know, building this community, because I would always be so open and honest. It was like, if you listen to this, you're my best friend. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know more about me than my parents do. And so over time, that becomes what it is, and we call Kind of Funny fans best friends, right? And we make these shows, and I think on paper, if you look at us, if you were, an old school advertiser, because now people kind of get it. But if you're an old school advertiser, or just if you just want to play the numbers game, I can easily see you coming to our channel and be like, these videos, they get 20, 30,000 views. These kids have 237,000 subs. Like, they're not a big deal at all, right? But then, and I use big deal loosely, but then we have people who want to work with us and sponsor us and send us around the world and host things. And I have 1 million Twitter followers and all these people. And then the Patreon numbers and this. And it's like, it's such a special thing, because we are, all I'm ever doing is talking to one person on the other end of the mic or on the other end of the camera. And if that's 40,000 people watching it, if that's 100,000 people watching it, if it's the insane number of downloads we do on MP3s, because that's what the majority of people do, great. I don't care what the number is. You know what I mean? Like, the community's built us to this point, to have a state-of-the-art studio, to be able to travel the world, to have 7 full-time employees and 3 contractors that are in every week, and whoever else we need to edit a weird show we want to do. Like, it's insane. And so that is the point, that it is all about that one person listening and making them understand how much they mean to me and how valued they are. And so, yeah, if it's that I'm lucky enough that when I go to a PAX or an RTX to, have sign for 2 hours or whatever and thank every one of those people, I'm going to do it.
They're not going to forget that, man, because every time I go to a different city, I always mention in our podcast, hey, I'm going to be in such and such city. Yeah. Let's get together. Let's have a little meetup, and I'll get together with a couple of our listeners. I even took them to, a couple weeks ago, I took them to Call of Duty World League. Yeah. World League, the championship in Columbus.
Yeah.
Man, they had the greatest time. I'm
sure.
Never going to forget that.
Oh, sure.
What I'm saying? So by you taking your time, talking to them, taking pictures, doing all
that's
that,
what it's all about, right? Like,
right?
that's, I mean, we were talking about this today on Kind of Funny Games Daily, right? Of like, a good business decision for Kind of Funny Games would be to number our reviews. To put number, all right, we played Spider-Man and we think it's an X out of 10 or whatever, right? However, that I think is antithetical to what Kind of Funny is, which it's just me talking to you. It's just me sitting on the couch next to you, talking to you, being in your passenger seat. Every time I do a review or talk about stuff, for me, I picture it when I shut my eyes of me in my rocking chair I used to have at my house and my friend Poe on the couch, because that was always what we would do. He'd come down and he'd see me playing Spider-Man, be like, all right, what's this all about? And I'd be like, oh, this is what, and I never was like, it's an 8 out of 10, it's a 9 out of 10. You know what I mean? Not that that's foreign or that doesn't exist in my life and history now. Not to say we might never ever do that. But like, for what we are and what we do, it's a conversation, which means that it's going to be something that doesn't appeal to everyone. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something that you can put out there and get every person to watch this hour-and-a-half long video that's a God of War spoiler cast or whatever, right? Like, we're making something for an audience that likes that kind of content.
Yeah. You know, I think I never talked about this on a podcast, but usually we know a lot of PR, and there was one that tried to compare us to you guys.
Oh, yeah?
Saying like, oh, but you guys don't have the numbers, like, Kind of Funny. And
in a bad way. So,
bad way.
I thought you were like going to be like, you got a great community, like Kind of Funny.
And that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of content creators that they probably feel like, oh man, I don't have 1 million followers like Greg.
Oh,
I don't have thousands and thousands of downloads like us, or, and so on. So they get it discouraged,
Oh, sure.
And by maybe they hear that from other PR marketing folks, saying that, that will discourage them too, man. So it's disappointing to see that when the industry are all stuck about the numbers, and it's good that you seeing it a different way, man.
I mean, there's always a bigger fish. There's always a bigger fish. There are a number of opportunities that Kind of Funny misses out on, right? That we just don't get because, we're not IGN. We're not this. We don't get invited to this event. I was bitching about it, for lack of a better term, on Games Daily again today, and this is kind of where the conversation was coming from, and the way that, Sony in particular puts us into the influencer bucket and not the press bucket. And that's still a hard pill for me to swallow, having been at IGN for so long.
I have to talk about that because right now, a lot of companies see us as press and influencers, so they put us in both lists, I think.
Yeah.
So you guys in the same situation then?
Yeah, and it's like it's just certain companies that struggle with it in quotes. And when I say struggle, I don't mean struggle, but I mean it means like we just get codes at different times. We get copies of games at different times than an IGN would or whatever. And it's like, oh, that's weird. Or we don't get invited to the exact same event somebody else does, right? It's like that's weird little stuff.
But I'm surprised from like coming from you guys though, because you guys are in a really higher position that maybe a lot of companies do see you guys as press instead of influencers.
I know the majority of people I think do, but then it is. I think EA has this in the influencer bucket. I think WB does too. Like it's weird stuff, but then even that, like it doesn't. None of it. What
confusing.
What it means to one company doesn't mean the same to the next company, and so it's just this weird thing of like, I get it, but it's also it's all bleeding edge of like, well, what is press anymore, and what is this, and I don't know what the hell.
So if a company, you're talking to a company, what you want them to consider you guys as? Both?
I mean,
or just one?
It's so rare. But if so you're saying like if they directly ask me, I'd want to probably influence. I'd want to be considered press because I feel like. But even that, I guess I understand their point, right? Because we do take sponsorships and we do to ad activations. It's the weird thing of, I guess technically by press, right? You would be sitting there. Enthusiast media. That's what I want to be called.
Oh, okay.
Because I mean, at IGN when I was now, granted, at IGN I didn't think I was a critic, right? And I still think I guess that's what I like to be thought of in terms of I'm critiquing the industry. Mm-hmm. But then I know shirtless Spider-Man and stupid stuff like that happens all the time. We put on proms.
By the way, guys, he has his shirt on. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. It's confusing, and I get it that it's confusing. It's just the shitty thing of just like, I guess what was always cool about us and what I think still resonates with companies and PR people and everything else is like, oh, it's Greg. And I know that he worked at IGN for all these years. I understand that he understands ethics. I understand that he understands embargoes. I understand we get a lot of shortcuts, even when we're in the influencer bucket. Not that that's a bad word. Not that I don't want to be an influencer. Just that I don't want to miss out on opportunities because of I'm in one bucket or the other, I guess is the problem.
But you guys can make that change in the industry. You know,
sure.
For more people could understand what you guys are doing and what other content creators are doing, because I feel like a lot of them are still stuck in the old school way.
Sure.
And they're lost.
Well, the problem is like, right, that no internet content creator is content creator A is not the same as content creator B, right? And that's where it gets confusing. And that's why we run into these little pain points where it's like, well, why am I doing it this way? Like, I'm not the exact same as a streamer. I'm not the exact same as this. And then it all just goes to hell. Yeah. It's confusing. I understand.
It is confusing.
It's just confusing. I don't want to put disclosure statements up. I don't mind telling. I will, as you know, if you give me 10 minutes, I'm going to tell you 20 minutes worth of things anyway. It's going to come up that I got the game for free or they send me somewhere.
We're going to wrap it up very soon here. What is it like the thing that you like the most about doing this now independently here in your own studio? And you know, compared to having a 9-to-5 job.
Sure. What I love about Kind of Funny is that our successes are our successes and our failures are our failures. Mm-hmm. I hated it at IGN, and the only place I've really worked. IGN, when it would be that I worked on this exclusive, I'm ready to do this thing, and then guess what? Somebody somewhere made a mistake, like 3 things down, and a video review went live, or my score got posted earlier, or the publishing system wigged out, and it's like, oh my God, I hate that. So it's because, especially when it made us look bad and I had to make a phone call or I had to put out an email and I had to jump on a grenade, right? Mm-hmm. Because of something else in the giant chain of command that went wrong. And I hated like just the game of feeling like you had to be there at embargo. Like, you know what I mean? I have to have something up because everybody else is. Kind of Funny is when we can have I remember our God of War review, right? Like our God of War review went up. I put up a video at embargo being like, hey, I'm talking right into my camera. I'm on location doing something else. Mm-hmm. Really loved it. We'll talk about it on the Gamescast. And that Gamescast did incredibly well. And it wasn't at embargo. It was, embargo, I want to say it was like Wednesday night, Thursday night, something like that. And it published for public on Monday. And it still did incredibly well. And I was like, oh, this is like what I'm talking about in a way of, I want it every different way. I want both sides of it. But like, our audience doesn't come to us for the breaking, what is the score out of 10? But a few days later, they'll totally be down to sit there for an hour and listen to what we had to say. Mm-hmm. And in the same breath, like, when something goes wrong here, we call it the garbage truck on fire, right? Like everything went wrong today on the morning show.
Nobody's perfect.
The computer's always exploding. You know what I mean? If we get something wrong, if we up a headline information, if we do the publish information, you can trace it back to the person that did it. And it's usually me. You know what I mean? And it's like, this is where it went wrong. You're like, all right, cool. Like, I get it. It isn't, the system didn't fail. It isn't something that got in the way. It was very much that we own all of this. And what I love about it on top of that level is that all of our successes and all of our failures are all the successes and all the failures of the audience. You know what I mean? Like, it's unheard of in the internet day and age we live in that we get sponsored by Portillo's. I make a video about that and the audience goes crazy. They're like, holy shit, what a moment for Greg. You know what I mean? He's hosting he got cast in a Ghostbusters commercial. I'm amazed. Everybody's watching this Mizzou commercial I did the VO for. Like, everybody sees, and what we talked about when we started Kind of Funny was, you're getting in on the ground floor of what we're building here and you're along for the ride. And so seeing us partner up with people at E3, right? Seeing me and Tim host the Final Fantasy stage show for Final Fantasy 15 reveal. Like,
That was awesome, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah. Our audience doesn't see that as selling out. They see that as us getting amazing opportunities because they're amazing.
Mm-hmm. Back then, magazines, like nowadays, it's so hard to find like old school EGM.
Oh no, totally. I was in a Barnes and Noble in the Mall of America. And I was like, I'm gonna go look for a gaming magazine. I was like looking at them, like, what the hell? Where are they?
But now all this content that us content creators have been putting online, it's gonna be there forever.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see. Hopefully.
I remember when I thought my IGN blog would be there forever, and then they changed systems, and it's all screwed up. I'm like, well,
no, but like, what is it that you want people to remember? Kind of funny 20, 30 years from now.
Oh man, 20, 30 years from now, I hope we're still going, of course. But what I'd want them to remember overall was that we were best friends. Like that's what this was. You know what I mean? I feel like it's hard to find a specific way to summarize anything on the internet, right? But what we were, the long and short of it, was 4, sometimes 5 best friends gathered around this table with thousands of friends on the other side of the microphone. Like whether it be listening or watching or whatever, they were there and they were all here with us, and we were all enjoying something together.
And what about an advice for those up and coming content creators that, you know, they want to do their own Kind of Funny?
I mean, keep at it. That's the biggest thing about it. You know what I mean? Like the advice that, you know, the reason I got the job at IGN is still the advice I give to everybody now, right? You need to be doing it. You need whatever you want to be doing. You need to be doing it every day. So if you want to have a success, you want to be a video host, you want to be a podcaster, you want to be writing reviews, you need to be doing that every day. And even the stuff that you don't like about it, like you only want to write or you only want a podcast, I'd be doing the YouTube channel and I'd be do it all because you need to do it all, and then find your voice and establish what it is and keep at it. And I think outside of consistency, what I always tell people to get into is specificity. Get a niche. Like if your site is going to be, you're going to launch whatever.com and your whole thing is, we're going to review everything, we're going to talk about it, that is so hard to do because there's already an IGN.com and a GameSpot.com. And it's why I think you see Polygon be like, we're not going to review games traditionally anymore. We want to be more think pieces and critiques and all these different things, because I don't know if people are going there people are going to Polygon, I think, for the features, not the reviews necessarily, at least in the traditional form. So you need to adapt and move. And if you're a solo creator, I always talk about it like, be the JRPG guy, be the Madden guy, be the 2K guy, be the guy in something, or the girl. Obviously, I'm using a pejorative. Be the person in something so that when they need that person, they can come find you. I was the video game person at Mizzou when I was going to school. So when there was a video game article, everyone knew, oh, Greg, there's something happening. We should get Greg.
You were the video game guy.
People would come and talk to me and want me to be part of those things. And that's what I think a lot of people need to do now, where it's like, you can be, jack of all trades, but you need to have something you're known for. It's like we just had on Games Daily yesterday as of recording, I got so caught up in the second part. David Jagno, right? And his whole thing is like, he's the VR guy, right? Like he's the gaming guy, upload VR guy. That's what he does. However, he freelances any non-VR stuff he wants to do to IGN, GameSpot, whoever the hell wants to hire him. Mm-hmm. And that's like such a great gig to be, right? That you are known as the VR gaming dude. That's where people know if they have it. It's similar to me, right? Of like, X-Men news breaks, people go somewhere else, but something Superman related is happening, I want to know what Greg's thinking. Something's happening with the Spider-Man game, what does Greg think? And that's The same thing I think of how I built my popularity. Now, granted, it was a lot of happenstance, thank goodness, just luck of the draw at IGN, but I got the PlayStation job, not the Xbox job, not the news job, not all these other jobs I applied for. I got the PlayStation job, which meant that I was known for PlayStation, which meant that when something changes with trophies or Shuhei does this, or they're still being so weird about Fortnite's cross progression, go talk to Greg. You know what I mean? Go see what he has to say about it.
Greg, well, I just want to say thanks, man, for
Thank you, man.
this
It's been great.
opportunity. It's an honor to actually be here. It's my first time here in the
Oh,
studio,
yeah. I got to
so,
walk
man.
you around still, show you the rest of it. I kind of just shoved you right in here.
Now, a lot of people want to know, man, what's going to happen after September 7th? Are we going to see more Spider-Man, shirtless Spider-Man? Or what?
I mean, I think you'll see a lot. I don't think Shirtless Spider-Man's going anywhere. From what he's told me, you know what I mean? There's still a lot of things and crimes for him to do. And I don't know if you noticed, a lot of Spider-Man properties out there that also don't have Shirtless Spider-Man in them. I don't think it's too late for him to start, going for Into the Spider-Verse, get involved there.
Time we got to sign a contract, man, Insomniac, man, to see, hopefully.
Exactly.
Hopefully make it happen, man.
They haven't announced what those next DLC pieces are. We just know Black Cat.
All right, man, thanks a lot, Greg.
Thank you.
You're listening to Gamertag Radio.
Yeah, that was a great interview with Greg. Shout out to him. Shout out to the whole team over there at Kind of Funny. I had an amazing time at the studio, and it was cool talking to Greg, man. Our conversation got deep. We talked about, how is it being a content creator and so on. And I hope you guys enjoy this. Please let us know your thoughts. You can hit us up, fanmail@gamertagradio.com. That's fanmail@gamertagradio.com. Or you want to join our Discord channel. We have listeners from all around the world there. We have great conversations about different topics. And I think it's a great way for you, the listener, you want to get together and play some games, online games with our community. Make sure to do that. So go to discord.gg/GTR. That's discord.gg/GTR. All right, so next week, the next episode of Gamer Tag Radio, we're going to have more interviews, more stuff. I can't talk about it just yet, but just stay tuned for the next episode of GTR. And that's it. Until next time, we're out. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Gamertag Radio. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Thank you for listening to Gamer Tag Radio. If you'd like to donate and help us out for future events and more coverage and also better audio equipment, head over to donate.gamertagradio.com. That's donate.gamertagradio.com. Thank you.